So good evening, and on behalf of the Women's Support Center, and good morning to those of you who are joining outside the U.S. Mato is calling in from Armenia. We have Meline Misropian calling in from Japan. So I really appreciate all of you being up in early hours to be with us tonight. So I'm Lena Garibian. I'm coming to you from the Boston, Massachusetts area. I've been involved with the Women's Support Center for several years. I serve on the organization's advisory board, and of course, I'm delighted to be moderating the panel tonight. So thank you. So we know that most of you have watched the film, The Stateless Diplomat, and so the plan for tonight is to pick up where the film leaves off, right? We're going to celebrate Diana's legacy, and it's really about time, right? I think that we know, and you read about this in some of the content that we provided early on, the failure to appreciate the role of the women and a role of women like Diana sort of leaves us with an incomplete version of our history, right? And an incomplete understanding of who we are as a people. So our purpose tonight is to shine a light on the massive contributions of Diana and other women like her doing work in Armenia today, fighting for social justice and for human rights. So the plan is we're going to jump into Q&A. I'm going to first introduce our guests. We're going to move into Q&A. Mimi is going to speak to some questions about her work and what she feels Diana's broader impact is. And then we're going to give Mato the opportunity to tell us about what's going on in Armenia today with the women's movement. So let me take a minute. I'm just going to quickly check the chat to see how things are going. Let me take a minute to first of all introduce Mimi Malayan. So Mimi Malayan, of course, is the director and the producer of The Stateless Diplomat. She actually practiced landscape architecture in San Francisco in the Bay Area for 20 years. After discovering a box of papers and books by Diana Abgar, she began what became a decade-long journey of researching Diana's history. So from ship manifests and US immigration documents to archives at Stanford and the American Red Cross, Mimi sort of poured over Diana's life and her accomplished. At some point, she was introduced to Meline Misropian, who's on this call, calling in from Japan, who was also, who had researched in Japanese foreign affairs, the archives of that time. And she had additional information that Mimi incorporated into the film. So the result is sort of this extensive collaboration of scholars, historians, and members of the Armenian community, which I think you mostly saw, also artists and editors. The film was released in 2018, and then since then, Mimi has shown it to several film festivals. She's won several awards, including the Armand T. Wegner Humanitarian Award at the ARPA International Film Festival in 2019, Best Biographical Film at the New Hope Film Festival in 2019, and the Audience Choice for Best Documentary at the Pomegranate Film Festival in November 2018. So while Mimi is mostly retired, she continues to teach at the Academy of Art University. So Mimi, welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. So yeah, thank you. And thank you, Mauro, for all the work that you do, and yeah, just the huge impact you have on Armenian society.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Mimi. This work has really been inspirational for all of us. Let me take a second to introduce Mato. Mato asked me to keep hers very short, and I know I'm smart enough to know that I need to honor that request, so it's short. In 2010, Mato Matosyan founded the Women's Support Center in Yerevan to assist women and child victims of domestic violence, and she also runs the Women's Support Center also runs 2 shelters. She serves as the organization's executive director. She's also one of the founding members of the Coalition to Stop Violence Against Women and was selected as an expert in the field by the Council of Europe. Welcome, Mato.
Thank you.
Melina Mesropian, who is on the line, is also joining us. As I mentioned, she's played a pivotal role in researching Diana's life. She was born and raised in Yerevan, has a background in Japanese linguistics. She's a PhD and a fellow researcher at Tohoku University and a lecturer at Hyogo University in Kobe, Japan. She spent the last 8 years researching the life and work of Diana Abgar, and she wrote her dissertation on using Japanese archival data on the Japanese government's processing of Armenian refugees during World War I and Diana Abgar's role in that. And I think she's continuing some additional research on Diana Abgar. So at some point we'll hopefully hear from Melina. I think she's still trying to dial in with questions. Yeah, she's still coming in. Okay, let's get started. Thank you, guys. One thing to note too is that the webinar is being recorded. There is going to be a Q&A panel. You'll have an opportunity to put those questions in the chat box, and we'll pick up them as we can. Okay, let's start with you, Mimi. Thanks, guys, for all your patience. So if you can, obviously we know as the great-granddaughter of Diana Abgar and having done all this work, if you can just start us off by speaking broadly to the impact of Diana's work, sort of her role in the Armenian story and ultimately what it means.
You know, being an activist, I think, is a major part of who Diana was. But I have to say that the biggest impact of her life was her humanitarian work. Even though she committed years to writing, her humanitarian efforts were not only significant in providing food, shelter, et cetera, to refugees, but it is due to her coordination with the Japanese government that, in fact, refugees gained asylum in Japan. And this is such a significant point, because without her participation, refugees who did not have proper visas, passport documentation, or did not have funding, they would not have been allowed to leave Russia. So they would have been stranded in Vladivostok or Harbin. And ships only left to the US from Japan. So they had to first have that, gain that, that right to travel to Japan in order to continue their journey. So, you know, to me, that was a huge, huge contribution. Not to say that they wouldn't have survived, but it wouldn't have been what they had intended. So their lives would have been just very different, and that of their descendants. So when I researched the refugees who came to the US, that I was basically compiling lists from ship manifests and immigration documents. It wasn't based on something that I inherited from Diana's paperwork or her own personal archives. Nothing came through the family. And from that research, I compiled a list of 600 people, but later on, after I had completed that list, Melanie actually found a newspaper article published in Japan in 1920, which stated that at that point, she had helped 2,500 people. And then, of course, her humanitarian work continued through the 20s, or at least part of the 20s. So her impact was truly significant in transforming all of these lives and that of their descendants.
Wonderful. I mean, so Melanie is on and I'm going to invite her to speak too. This is one thing that I find so fascinating is that the impact is really still unfolding. And I know that Melina continues to do that work. Can you add, would you like to add to that, Melina? And welcome.
Oh, hello, everyone. Thank you can you hear me?
Yep, we can.
Yes. Oh, great. Okay. Sorry, I'm a little bit, out of breath a little bit because I was cycling uphill and, to get to you. So anyway, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity, even though I was very busy this morning to take my son to the kindergarten. But anyway, I made it. So, yeah, I mean, Mimi has already told you everything. I mean, introduced Diana's work, and I'm just, Diana, like doing research about Diana is, of course, I'm a researcher and it doesn't have to be personal, but I mean, I don't know, from the very beginning, it became very personal. And when I had my final defense when I was getting my PhD, the professors told me, oh, you know what, I mean, you talk about Diana as if it's very personal. I'm like, I'm Armenian, and even though I'm a researcher, and I was trying to be, as a researcher, writing unbiased things, but at the end of the day, it's very personal to me because it's about my history, it's about the genocide, it's about my people, and how Diana helped these people. It's just about me in a way, that's why it's really difficult for me to be not personal. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so Diana's work was pretty amazing, and I'm still finding some things that I didn't know about. Like, I was writing to Mimi about that the other day, and I'm just gonna talk here a little bit about it. So I found this very early articles about Diana's early activities that till now it hasn't been known. So before Adana massacres, because we know that Diana's passion about helping Armenians and about being vocal about the Armenian problem was after the Adana massacres. But we didn't know what she was actually doing before Adana massacres. Of course, she was writing. She already started writing the Susan and the Home Stories of the War, which was, dedicated to the Japanese people who suffered during the Russo-Japanese War. But what did you do before that? So it was interesting for me to find these articles that said that Diana, let's say, for example, 1896, she was doing, let's say, fundraising for the Indian people who were suffering during the famine in India, or she was doing other fundraising as well, because until now we knew that she was doing fundraisings, but we didn't know for what. We didn't have proof, but now we do, and it was very exciting for me to find all this. Also, I found other documents that tells just very little bit about Diana's very early life, like when she was still in India. I mean, it wasn't directly connected to Diana itself, but it was connected to Diana's parents. So Diana's father, who appeared to have a indigo factory in Calcutta, which was so fascinating for me because we didn't know about those things. And now we can kind of imagine how Diana's life was during that time. I'm talking about 1870s. And then I found out that Diana's father, Johannes Arabeg, left her factory to her mother, who, as I can see, I don't know whether it's true or not, but it seems like she continued her husband's job till the end of her life. And So how was Diana at that time? You know, it's also amazing to see how the factories worked at that time, especially indigo factories, etc. So anyway, I can talk long about this, but thank you very much for having me here. I'm very excited. Thank you.
No, thank you. I want to pose just another question as we think about what's happening in Armenia today and the women today. And this could be for Melina or Mimi, either of you. How do you feel when you look back? How do you feel that the work of Diana is relates to the work that's going on today in Armenia? Or Melina, you as an Armenian from Yerevan, how do you feel? What are the parallels? And I'll leave it to either of you to pick it up.
Mimi, please.
I'll just say, you know, her main focus in her writings is self-determination. You know, she absolutely believed that Armenians should be governing themselves. So to have an independent country was her dream, and you know, she was absolutely convinced that, you know, all you had to do was give Armenians their own land and they would flourish, which was a little starry-eyed, I would have to say. You know, that was, but you know, that determination, the activism that's going on now, the diasporan involvement in Armenia, those are things that she would be promoting, be involved in, be, you know, part of. I would also say that she would be arguing for reparations. You know, she never let up on her condemnation of, you know, Turkey and the stolen properties and, you know, robbers. There has to be restitution. So there's no question that in my mind that she would pursue that as well. But she would be very proud, certainly, of, you know, Armenia defining itself and finding a path. So, Melanie, please.
Anything?
Oh, yeah. I mean, to find parallels between Diana's work and this, what's happening in Armenia now. Was that the question? You mean, sorry, just to clarify, in political point of view, or?
I think in general, I mean, I think we're thinking about the role of women today and how it's changing, and thinking about the way she viewed the world, you know, and just sort of looking, yes, for parallels in terms of her spirit. And I think Mimi put it quite nicely, that I think this notion of self-determination. Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
And social justice.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't have much to add to this, but you know, I think in a way, Diana was, even though we don't know about it, because she has never put it on paper, in a way, she was pretty much feminist. In a way, I don't want to say it, you know, in a certain way, because she has never talked about it, but she was definitely supporting women. Because she was welcoming those news about women's success in the world, let's say women becoming the first, you know, what do you call it, first workers, like activists, and she was welcoming those news. And she was definitely supporting women. And I don't know, yeah, I mean, yeah, there is not very much to add to what Mimi already said.
Well,
she does make one comment.
Mhm.
I don't remember where it is, that if women were governing the world,
Oh, yes.
we
Yes.
would not be in constant war, or something to that effect.
Yes, I think it's one of his books.
Yeah.
I don't remember which one it was though.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. She was also a deeply religious person, which I didn't
Oh,
know. And it obviously it was had such a profound part of her life. I mean, she has a profound relationship sort of with God and spirituality. So I think that is really interesting and special. So
yeah. In fact, my mother used to talk about, you know, that for an hour every day was the time you never disturbed her.
right.
It was the time that she would, well, basically sing the Badarak, you know, and yeah, that was just absolutely critical to her daily routine.
yeah. You know, in the Japan, in the Far East, it's a newspaper. It was a newspaper in Japan. I found one of her articles where she talks about religion. And in that article, I'm sorry, I can't give you details about that article right now. I just remember about it. But when you read that article, you can see her her views about about religion in general.
Mhm. Yeah.
It was very interesting for me to read.
Yeah.
And she talks about how she was connected to the church when she was, you know, going to the church and listening to the songs in the church, and you can see how she was in touch with the church so much in that article.
So I'm going to ask Mato to actually take the floor in a minute, but before we sort of segue into Mato's presentation, I want to give her the opportunity to answer a question that came from the audience, which is sort of subverting the process here, but it's a good one and it's relevant. So what do you think, Mato, about what this question about what's missing in our women to stand for their rights now, that the sense of agency that she had then? And I know we're going to get into this more, but if you want to just give us sort of your top of mind thinking about what it was, the sort of sense of agency that Diana had that might to some extent be missing, or maybe perhaps it's evolving.
I think that Diana was really in a difficult position. She was in a man's world in that time, as many women in Armenia are today, because we're still in a very patriarchal society. And, you know, the struggles are very much the same. To me, I admire how prolific she was. And perhaps the parallel is that women, you see, we in the diaspora, we came from the legacy of the genocide, and very much tend to focus onto ourselves. So in a way, we are in a bubble. But Diana was not, because she, as was mentioned, she had she was in touch with events in India. She was familiar with the Japanese society and culture. You know, she transcended all that. And I see that very much nowadays in the young women of Armenia, because they start to study abroad. They interact with visitors and people who do research here in Armenia, non-Armenians. And this interaction and the exchange that is happening and coming outside of the national, let's say, parameters, allow women to think more broadly and in terms of universal rights of women. And this is something that Diana was just promoting and supporting and helping whereas women now in Armenia are moving a step forward and really trying to incorporate some of the ideas, some of the positions that universally women are fighting for, which I'm going to talk a little bit in my presentation.
Okay, let's move to that. We're at the half hour, so let's move to that. So Mado, why don't I just sort of throw out this big sort of broad question, and then you've sort of prepared some notes for it. And I think, and as I do that, I'll pull up your slide presentation so you can speak to it. But if you can start by just talking us to sort of this overall importance of sort of giving voice to prominent female role models in Armenia, sort of, and in our history. So what work has been carried out to put these important figures back into our narrative?
Yeah, thank you. And I want to recognize Judy Norsikan, who is a participant here and who is also a part of our team of recognizing prominent women in our history. To start, I've lived in Armenia since 1991 and saw considerable change. Back in the 90s, no one spoke of women's rights or feminism, therefore no one advocated for it. Slowly, thanks to non-governmental organizations or NGO, as you know them, a grassroots movement has started. Young women were slowly coming out from constraints of conservatism of their families and surroundings, and more were interested in women's issues. Others were finding safe spaces to express themselves, to point out to the injustice and inequality. Young women also realized that they are a force in the Armenian society, making up more than 54% of the population, yet their treatment was deplorable. Unfortunately, after the independence and the introductions of free market system, we immediately heard the narrative that women should take care of children and be at home to make room for the sparse employment opportunities, to make room for men for those sparse employment opportunities. So in the last 10 years, I can say that much has changed, but we still have a long way to go. Women activists fed up with the patriarchal narrative and in search of role models that have brought forth the knowledge and awareness of Armenian women from history. I want to emphasize here that, the textbooks, the school textbooks in general, no women were brought forth or portrayed, and it was the activism of young women in Armenia that brought forth this change. So one such example was Abel Yesayan, who was largely portrayed and used as a role model, feminist and activist and writer. Zabel Yesan perhaps now is more and more into the narrative of young women, and they're much more aware of her role. Women activists in Armenia started to push not only for rights in the labor market, combating gender stereotypes in everyday life, but also in the educational system and textbooks, representation in leadership positions, representation of women in leadership positions and government, fighting against gender-based violence, and also started to promote the important contribution of women in our society. Thus, we notice slowly small moves to promote famous women, such as recently opened Dana Abgar's park, that perhaps you can see on your screens now. Oh, hold on just a second. What did I do? I lost my text. Oh boy.
You'll find it, Mano. Just, you can close.
I don't know how to, oops.
Go back to the, Shall I stop sharing, Mado, and then maybe you can kind of get centered? Maybe that will help you get centered.
Okay, sorry, yeah, I got it.
Okay.
Armenia started to put out billboards of famous Armenians, and we noticed that there were no women there. So we pushed for Zabel Yesayan's billboard. Also in the diaspora, a young woman created a children's book on Zabel's biography that is now sold in the bookstores of Yerevan. And also the statue of prolific poet and feminist Shoshani Gurginian, which Iowa in Boston translated into English her poems. So slowly we are seeing much more interest in prolific women of Armenian descent. Today, I'm working with women in Armenia and diaspora to create 15 more billboards to promote women artists, scientists, writers, resistance fighters, etc. That and there is in Yerevan today a feminist library, and more young women are shedding off gender stereotypes and ask for gender equality, justice, and representation in society. Upon viewing Diana's Abgar's film, I was taken by how prolific and active of a woman Diana was. We knew her as the first woman ambassador, but she was also a lobbyist for Armenia, a fundraiser for repatriation, a businesswoman, a humanitarian aid worker, an activist, wife, and mother. So I could not help and see the resemblance to present-day women activists in Armenia. Many women activists in Armenia wear several hats as fundraisers, aid workers, service providers to women. For example, we at the Women's Support Center offer services and protection to victims of domestic violence, educate communities to raise awareness on the subject, to train service providers such as police and social workers. And important work is done as advocates or lobbyists for legal reform and proper procedures by police, health workers, and teachers. When Women's Support Center started to work in 2010, we were an unknown organization and there was no discourse in society about domestic violence. 2010 was a turning point as the first known case of domestic violence was prosecuted as a murder, that of Zarui Petrosyan, which also motivated 5 NGOs to create the Coalition to Stop Violence Against Women. We worked very hard, and to this day, some are attacking us as being foreign agents or that we break up families and traditional values. All irrelevant arguments when it comes to saving women's lives. From being an unknown organization, we became the premier support service for victims of domestic violence, running the only 2 shelters in Armenia. We are members of the Ministry of Social Affairs Council on Domestic Violence, and you can see here one of our meetings where other government agencies are represented, are participating. We participate in numerous conferences and press conferences. Finally, in 2018, when domestic violence law was debated in Parliament, we were there, and one of our beneficiaries, survivors of domestic violence, testified in Parliament. And this is a great achievement to bring a voice to those people who are suffering. Finally, in 2019, the Ministry of Social Affairs and Women's Support Center signed the MOU by which we were to recruit, train women's support centers in all 10 regions of Armenia and open a second shelter. The financing came from All Armenia Fund with the support of a San Francisco Armenian woman. Today we have these centers, and we trained, and also both the government and the Council of Europe office in Armenia considers us as local experts in the field of domestic violence. And it's really wonderful now, post-revolution, to see government members, government departments to collaborate very closely with us and advance in the field of protection for women. Another area that we work in is that of raising awareness and educating communities, as I mentioned. In this respect, we train police, social workers, but also youth and community at large, distributing brochures, pamphlets, and other relevant information. We often participate on discussion on TV, give interviews, and try to be the voice of women who have been silenced or are afraid to speak out, and thus bring the narrative of protecting women from violence. Parallel to awareness raising, together with the Coalition to Stop Violence Against Women, we participated in many protests in front of courts, government buildings, and marched on Women's Day on March 8th. And also we pushed for posters at bus stops to inform population on the helplines for domestic violence. I just want to mention that the billboards and these posters on domestic violence, they are in Yerevan. And we are trying to expand now in the regions as well. Our center thus has seen an early increase in calls and number of beneficiaries. I mean, every year we have more and more people coming to our center. And this is good in the sense that people are coming out and fleeing abuse, which is also credit to the awareness raising, but also to the existence of the law that gives some assurance of protection. We now have two newly renovated shelters that can house 24 women and 48 children. And you can see here some of photos. Of course, these are confidential, so we cannot show the faces of women there. At the center and at the shelters, we offer women psychological counseling, social services, and legal defense. Most importantly, we empower women, build their self-confidence, and restore their ego, which was broken by the abuser. Whenever the women request, and in accordance to funding possibilities, we send women to vocational training, provide them with tools to start their own businesses, many preferring to work from home as they have small children. And you can see here some of the entrepreneurship that some women have started in their own homes. Like Diana Abgar, when the need calls, on a dime, we turned our center into a refugee aid center, distributing clothes, bedwear, kitchenware, hygienic products, food, and other services to those refugees that or displaced people that came from Karabakh. We thus assisted over 2,000 families in the past 12 months. And this is in addition to our regular work with victims of domestic violence. You can see here some stats of the services we offered over the 10 years. And as you can see, we are proud to say that 73% of women live a life free of abuse and fear. And that is a true success story. Moreover, the result of advocacy and awareness raising, domestic violence has become acknowledged as a real issue within public policy and mainstream discourse. But for all this work, we need financing to continue. As you can see, this is the 1 month expense for one survivor, not considering utilities and internet and other administrative costs. So as you can see, the women in Armenia are struggling to advocate for women's rights, protect women, and also assist women in need. Diana Abgar too was doing this work, often single-handed. We need solidarity and support, because by fighting for a just and democratic society, it implies achieving gender equity, promoting justice, and supporting women to live a life free of abuse, and also be empowered both emotionally and economically. Thank you. I hope I will be able to respond to your questions.
Thank you, Maro. So yeah, so anyone who would like to raise their hand or offer, I mean, I think I can actually give you a mic if you'd like to speak, or you can enter a question in the chat. Feel free to do that. Either Mimi or Melina, if you have anything to add at this point, the floor is yours as well.
Well, thank you for bringing up the park. I've only seen pictures online. It was dedicated in October of 2019. And it kind of started, the film showed at the Golden Apricot Film Festival in July 2019. And a city council person came to the screening, guy named Melkomian, and she wrote the proposal, which Melanie edited and then resubmitted. And anyway, but she was the power behind naming that
Well,
site.
yes, Guyane comes from civil society. She entered as advisor counselor at the city hall in Yerevan. And you see this continuation of women activism and slowly entering into government structures, the impact that they can have. We would not have expected men to think about Diana Abgar's park, and thank God. I mean, it is the result. Guyane being also an activist and in support of public spaces, in support of defending public spaces, not to be taken over by construction. But she's also women's rights advocate, and it was through the years, through the 90s and the first decade of 2000, that these young people were forming. And after the revolution, when they entered the government, they all are now having their 2 cents into various issues. And we have such women now in parliament as well to advance women causes and to advance recognition of women in society. So this is something so valuable.
Yeah.
I'd like to add like 2 words. Dear Maro, thank you very much for your presentation. I obviously didn't know much about it. And I just want to say that you are right about many women in Armenia starting being more active, especially helping those who are in need in domestic violence. And I can give you one example, and I'm really supporting her so much from far, just morally, and just, Narine Manukyan, who is the Maired organization founder, Hi Maired, and who is supporting the children who are suffering from brain stroke. And she has done this amazing work supporting mothers who didn't have a job, obviously, who were living in rural areas, not in the center of Yerevan, but in rural areas. And obviously they were just busy with their housework and not being very respected by their husbands, and especially those who didn't have husbands and who had like invalid children. And she has done amazing this program, just giving the opportunity for these women to learn something new, that they can have jobs. And there are so many people that remind me about, because I'm researching about Diana, and there are women who are doing almost the same thing that Diana was doing in their way, and they really remind me about her every day. Like for me, it's really
thank you, Melina. It's true. The activism of women nowadays that we see, it's something that, keeps me going and gives me so much hope for this country. When I was asked to find out about women organizations that are willing to work in domestic violence, when I was mapping out the country for women organizations to train them in as support centers for domestic violence, I found out in Yereknadzor, in Goris, in Ichevan, women who were working as volunteers. I mean, they on their own will, on their own drive, that they saw this the problems, and they're trying to help out women and organize locally. And was a surprise to me, because we did not have that tradition, especially in the 90s. Nobody was thinking of volunteering. It was a very foreign concept for people. But now they come out and they do a lot of good work. And this when I recognize these women, I included them into the program, and they registered their own NGO later on, and now they're very, very active and very, very productive in their work. So it's very encouraging to see women taking initiatives on their own and to help out and to assist, as Melina was pointing out.
Otto, I have a question from the floor it's related to this, and I know that you've studied other women's movements, both just in general women's movements, but then also related to domestic violence and creation of DV shelters in the United States. How do you estimate the pace of change right now in the women's movement versus the resources available? In other words, do you see the pace of change as adequate given the networking, the financial and human resources that are available in Armenia's reality today? So I know that's a big question, but
well, you know, in US in the 60s, we have a very much of an organic women's movement, and the second wave of feminist movement, and it was very organic, and it took a long time for to adopt the legislation that would protect women, to combat violence against women. It took a long time. Whereas, and a lot of research has been done by psychologists and social workers and feminists. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel in a way. The knowledge and the methodology on how to deal with certain situations, sexual abuse, sexual assault, domestic violence, it's all there. We, of course, adopted those international standards, but in terms of how we spread out and how women have become more feminist oriented or women's rights oriented, that it's slowly happening, and that can be done only through the activism of women who constantly bring forth these issues, constantly voice out the problems and the perspective of things. You know, yesterday I was at the presentation by World Vision, and people in the audience there coming from the Ombudsman's office or from the Ministry of Social Affairs, they also had very narrow views about women, what it entails, empowerment of women. For them, it was education and a good social economic status. And it's much more than that. So at every occasion when we speak out, when we express different concepts, different ideas, that interaction changes the mindset. And slowly we see a lot of this happening in Armenian society. It's not, by any means, I cannot compare to what it was in the 90s. We are very, very far ahead from what it was then. And the fact that the government now, it's starting to adhere to our ideas and not only ideas, but to the issues that women face and that they try to solve those issues, it's something, a step forward. I just want to also, but having said that, I don't want to point a very rosy picture that Armenia is becoming a very a society where gender equality persists. No, by far, that is not the case. We have a long way to go. But from what it was, when we were not even cognizant of the issues, to now, when women are become activists, we've come a long way. I see here a question by Dana Kutzer.
Yeah.
Has the young male population adopted more progressive views towards the treatment of women? No, no, it's a short answer. Yes, there are young men, especially in Yerevan, that are becoming much more sensitive to women issues, but by and large, no. And we try to have discussions with young men and women, but it's very, very difficult. It's very difficult. Even the men that work in ministries, we have a lot of difficulty with them to understand the issue compared to the women that work in ministries who get it. It will take a long time, and I think more and more, you know, it's a very misogynist culture, and it will take a long time. And here, everybody has to work at it. In schools, for example, now there is a lot of movement, effort to change the textbooks, because the textbooks were very much promoting these gender stereotypes where the girls, you know, or the mothers are cooking and cleaning, and the boys are having active activities. And even the selections of literature, the text in the literature, were very much promoting gender stereotypes. The same thing with the soap operas on TV. So on every level, we're trying to raise awareness. We complain about some of the ads that are very demeaning towards women. So every time you have to be alert, and every time you have to raise your voice. It's only then that change can happen. And slowly, hopefully, when at all levels of society, the culture changes, that when we could see a change in the male attitude towards women.
Actually, I'd love to pose this question. Thank you for that, Mado. I'd love to pose this a similar question to Meline. Meline, having grown up in Yerevan, I would love for you to respond to what Mado just said about the teachings in schools. And I'd love to know if at all, if you were taught about women activists growing up, like Diana Abgar, like Zabel Yasayan, you know?
Oh, not at all.
Not at all.
No, I went to school when I was the first grade. I went to the Soviet school because actually the Soviet just collapsed, and I went to the first grade elementary school, and nothing like that was taught. Not at all. No. And what I was seeing as a very young girl, just women in the kitchen and men in front of the TV, or just, you know, just doing what in brackets they were meant to do. But you know, when my maternal side, for example, my maternal grandfather and my uncle, I could see them in the kitchen, and it was it was really so nice for me as a young girl to see them, like washing the dishes, doing you know, cooking, and helping their wives, and etc. But not my paternal side. And my father was also not like that. He was very, like, you know, that Armenian man, that women must do all the dishes and stuff in the kitchen. But I wasn't taught like anything like that in school. No, not at all.
And I want to add that also Armenian women also are not cognizant of the problems. for example, yesterday when I was at that presentation, they were saying that, these are the problems in the regions, not in Yerevan. And I say, no, it's all over. You might be in your own surrounding where you see better situation, more equality, but it's really everywhere. The issue of gender inequality. But yeah, it takes time, and I think Armenia has made a lot of progress, and it's going to be making a lot of progress. But films like Mimi's film, access to information and raising awareness among the population, and now a lot of the places are putting an accent on having representations of women in our we're saying gender mainstreaming. In other words, the gender issue to be present in every aspect of society. The way you determine the budget for the country, the way you select your government, the way you teach in schools, the way you address in public spaces women's needs and issues. So it takes more of an effort, both from the activists, from the population, from civil society, and also from the government.
And by the way, I was taught only one single sentence about Diana when I was at school. Only one single sentence, and I had no idea about her humanitarian work, like zero. I started knowing about it when I came to Japan. Yeah, sorry.
And I'll just add to that, Melanie, the one sentence you learn is that she was honorary consul to Japan, which is her most insignificant accomplishment. Exactly. In fact, the Japanese government never formally recognized her appointment because of the transition to the Soviet government. And so her letter of executor, as it was called, was dated the end of July 1920. And then by November, the government was already transforming. So her position was, almost inconsequential, to tell you the truth. The formal appointment was absolutely minimal, and it actually had nothing to do with what she accomplished.
Exactly.
So everything before her appointment and then continuing after her appointment, it's a wealth of. She committed her life to her work. So.
Right, and because we are talking about women, one of the reasons that Japan didn't formally recognize her appointment was because according to the international law at that time, every state had right to reject the appointment when it was a woman. So because Diana was a woman, that could be one of the reasons that her appointment was rejected, because she was a woman. Because Japan was very strong, like man-oriented society, like very strong.
Yeah,
I know we're at.
Still is.
Yes, it still is. Yes.
I know we're at time, but I have one more question. If you'd like to stay on and answer this one. This is for Mimi or Merine. What do you think sort of at her essence, sort of inspired Diana to do what she did, to become an activist? We've talked about her religious upbringing, but ultimately, and I think in the film, there are several people who speak to her, this unique ability that she had to communicate with people, to connect with people's humanity. Like, what was there about her that made her so different? What made her tick and inspired her?
It's a very, very good question. Yeah.
I personally, I think it was, she had a mission, you know, she had a calling. So, and it was her faith that, well, and just basically who she was as a person. But she, she felt that she was given this task, that I can't underestimate that religious fervor in her, that her faith was, I mean, the only reason she has a nervous breakdown, and the one sentence she reveals is, "My faith has trembled." But, you know, that was absolutely shattering to say those 3 words to me. I mean, she was devastated at that moment in time. So yeah, for me, it was her faith that that gave her purpose.
Yeah. What Mimi said is, I agree 100%. I felt exactly the same, because she was that kind of person. I mean, but I have been asked the same question by my professors, by the editors that by my editor that I'm working with, and it is really difficult for me to explain in a from the academic point of view, because you have to write something that the readers will read and say, oh, okay, I see. That's why she was so passionate about helping the Armenians. But that faith was obviously one of the big, aspect. But also, when we look back at her childhood, where she was, when she grew up, and what kind of society she was surrounded by. And especially this recent discoveries that I made about her father's indigo factory. At that time, indigo factories, the farmers who were the owners of the indigo factories, they were actually not very nice people, in a way that they were treating their workers very badly. That's the whole picture about the farmers at that time. I don't know whether Diana's father was anything like that. I can't say, obviously, but the workers in the farm were peasants, obviously, and they were very poor, and they didn't get money. They were like slaves. And I was wondering, I started asking questions. What was Diana aware of that at that time, about being peasant, about being treated very poorly, like people that were working at his father's factory? How was Diana reacting to that? That was my questions. And also, when she was in Calcutta, because in Calcutta the Armenian society there were a lot of humanitarians, a lot. They were helping people. They were raising money. There were a lot of fundraisers for schools, for helping people, etc. Also, among her relatives, there were a lot of people, who were helping others. So she was surrounded by those kind of people, and obviously that had a huge impact on her, I think.
Yeah, the Armenian community, particularly in Calcutta, but all throughout India, was extremely progressive.
Right.
Yeah, in the 19th century.
I would like to comment also, because when Lena asked the question, I was thinking of the young women of Armenia, what made them tick as well to engage in activism. And I think for the most part is their empathy with the pain and suffering of women when seeing injustice. And some of these women react. not all of them, and very few of them actually have feminist ideas and theories, and but they really react. It's a reaction to the suffering of women, and the injustice and the inequality when they see how they are treated. I think that sparks something, triggers something into them to take a step forward.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Also,
I'm sure that happened to. I mean, don't forget, in the times of Diana Abgar, she was not a witness, but it happened to the genocides, the massacre, the Adana massacre and the genocide, and there was tremendous suffering, tremendous displacement. I mean, the nation was in peril, and it's obviously a woman like her would definitely react, and her faith as well, probably, but mostly I think seeing the suffering that's happening.
And it's very surprising the detailed information she has of current events that are transpiring. It just shocks me how well informed she is, and I still wonder how she could.
Yeah. And the same was for Zabel Yesayan. She was the only woman documenting the Adana massacre, the only person, not even the only person documenting the Adana massacres and seeing the suffering. And we know in general, and I see now among the refugees, the most suffering are the women of the families. Either they have lost the husband or a brother or a son, or they have to put on their shoulders the entire struggle to make ends meet, to survive, to care for the family in very precarious circumstances as refugees in precarious shelters or dormitory rooms and all that in those conditions. So yeah, the women are the ones that always take the most of the burden in any difficult situation.
Yeah, I think about what Stepan Asdourian said in the film about this notion about in the middle of the crisis, sort of never underestimating the power of the individual, right? The power of the individual to raise one's voice, and that's what she did with this kind of moral clarity, right? And I honestly, Mato, to be frank, I mean, I feel like through the past crisis that we've had in Armenia, I feel like you've done the same thing in terms of continuing to push women's rights and to call what's right, and to continue working with on the ground in the midst of all of the chaos in Armenia, just continuing to push.
And Lena, I feel absolutely. Let me say something. When I mentioned that on a dime, our center changed into a refugee aid center, and we had the government sent us clothes and a lot of items to distribute. And it's funny because all of a sudden I saw my office taken over by these young women coming as volunteers because they've heard that we were distributing to help up with the triage, with the distribution and so forth. They were the women that came. And the only men that came to help were the husbands of some of the women. So the force there were the women, and the husbands as volunteers, they would take the bags and packages in their cars, and they would do the distribution to various addresses that were given to us. But again, we didn't see men coming, even though I have to say the young men also, some of them, they were also volunteering in other places. But to our center were the women that came.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I just like to add one thing about Diana's activities. You know, in the film, it's I think it's a lot about that that I want to add, is that there is a part of Diana's activities that no one can actually see unless they read her letters, because there are so many letters that she wrote to these individuals and reveal her hidden activities that no one actually knew. Like, it was not in newspapers, it was not in published books, it was somewhat hidden, you know, but she was very active and she was fearless. She would write this very strong letters to people who she disliked. She just disliked, but she wrote these letters to say that you are wrong. You are doing injustice and you must change and you must do it right. And she was just fearless. And there is a lot that no one actually knew. Seriously, like she did a lot of work.
That's amazing. That's brilliant.
Okay.
I think we are at time. It's 9:15. So before we leave today, I just want to say thank you to everyone. Mimi, thank you so much for your work. You were the one who reached out to us to say, I love the work the Women's Support Center is doing, and I feel like there is synergy. I feel like there's a parallel. I want to do this. So thank you for reaching out to Motto and then and for bringing us all along. Motto, again, thank you so much for your work. Melina, thank you for jumping in sort of on short notice to do this. It was really so great to have your voice. And again,
thank you for having me.
Yeah, this has been such a great night. It's the same mindset that keeps us all going, and we just are so happy to have had you all here. I just want to just make a couple of comments. Please, I made a note that Mimi has offered CDs to anybody who wants them. I left my email in the chat. Let me know if you're interested. She's happy. We can get them to you. She's offered them for anybody who registered. So please let us know if you are. The webinar will record it. We have to do some editing, and we'll get it out to people who did participate. Please continue to support and spread the word of the Women's Support Center and the amazing work that the group of women in Armenia and in the US are doing for Armenia, not just for individuals, but for civil society and at the government level. This is a big effort, and it's really just a small group of people who are doing it. Another thing I wanted to let you know of, the Women's Support Center is celebrating its 10th year this year. So it's a big year for the organization. In Los Angeles on December 4th, we are hosting, well, it's actually the AWA, the American International Women's Organization is co-sponsoring or co-hosting a 10th anniversary gala in Los Angeles. The special guest is former ambassador to Armenia, Maria Yovanovich, who has been a part of the Women's Support Center. And as many of you know, the AWA, Armenian International Women's Association, was one of the early funders of the Women's Support Center. So again, you can email me or Motto if you want more information on that. And just please stay engaged, and thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.